Welcome to this edition of Captains of Industry. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. Our guest today is Sello Moloko, incoming chairman of Absa Group, South Africa's third largest bank by assets, which has had its fair share of challenges in the past few years since, shall I say, entanglement with the United Kingdom's Barclays PLC. So you could say he has had a life well lived. No, Mr. Chairman, I'm not writing your obituary. I am simply celebrating a life that has taken you from the busy streets of Soweto to the world's capitals, from a teacher to a portfolio manager, may I remind you, to CEO of your own enterprise. So some would ask the question, what drove you to accept the challenge when perhaps, islands far away, sunsets in exotic locations were beckoning? Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Godfrey, for that introduction. What drove me to accept this, I think I am an individual that likes a challenge. And the prospect of leading one of the most important institutions in South Africa and helping to solve the challenges that it is facing was something that I found exciting. And it wasn't an easy decision to make, given where I am age-wise, but I just thought I still have 9 years in me to give something and drive meaningful change.
Yeah.
So that was the driver, really.
Yeah. Your friend Tabolu describes you as a problem solver. I think he was looking back at your background and your mathematician career in aspects, and he was saying this is something that you would love to take on, break it down bit by bit. Let's begin where you are likely to begin. The selection of a new CEO for the company. What will you be looking for? I know, of course, that you're going to be part of a process.
Sure. I think we, in terms of the CEO process, Absa needs to appoint a permanent leader to help drive the commercial and strategic aspirations of the business going forward. So in that leader, we will be looking for, obviously, relevant experience. In the banking sector, we will be looking for, an aspect of continuity, just ensuring that whatever journey we are on at Absa, that it's a journey where we are able to continue and execute on our strategic intent.
Yeah, and one of the challenges, of course, has got to be to identify what Absa Group is. Of course, we do know that Absa has a long history in South Africa, but Absa also had, shall we say, a testing time when you extricated yourselves from the Barclays Group. What kind of identity will this new leader be trying to find with your help and, of course, with the other leaders in the company?
Sure. I mean, you will know that Absa Barclays came in, bought Absa, and then we had to disentangle ourselves from a decision that was made by Barclays to disinvest out of Africa. With that, is a situation where there was a culture of Absa, and then you were consumed into the Barclays way of doing things, and then you have to redefine a new way of doing things. And I think this is something that the board has got on its radar to say, how do we actually redefine the new way, the Absa way? And one of those, centers around the theme of Africanity. Accepting our African identity, accepting that also that Africa is not a homogeneous place. It's got its own unique characteristics depending on the regions where we operate. So we operate primarily in 12 regions, and we've got obviously representative offices in other parts of the continent. So we operate mainly in 15 countries. So we've got to reflect, the flavor of what being an African bank is. And that's something that is a journey that we have started to embark on, to define what an African bank truly is.
Yeah, and you come into the chairman's office with a wealth of experience. I was doing my maths and I saw over 30 years within financial services. But the industry is also facing a very challenging time. Never mind the Ukraine war, just in itself, the banking industry and what it will become as technology evolves and advances. I wanted your thoughts in respect of where you see banking going and the kind of issues that you as leader of one of the big banks here in South Africa will be addressing.
You know, banking is an evolving industry. Like we have seen telecoms evolve, you know, from the days of fixed line to what we know telecoms to be today. And we know that with the advent of improvement in telecommunications, we've seen telecoms kind of creep into the financial services arena. We've seen also the advent of fintech, you know, as technology improves, you know. So where are the risks for banking? The risks for banking are with the disruptors. And the disruptors will find a way to disintermediate the regulatory framework to ensure that they own the client. So banks have to fight with some of these new emerging players to own the client, to make banking easier for the client. I don't necessarily believe that banking at its core will change, you know, because of the need to regulate, because you're dealing with people's assets here.
Sure.
So at the core, it wouldn't change, but I think in terms of interface, that's where the change will emerge. And it is there where us as banks need to ensure that we are relevant and we play. As you know, with disruption, we've seen even in the telco space, we've seen how BlackBerry was annihilated. You know, nobody uses BlackBerry today. So you don't want to end up being the BlackBerry of the banking world, or being the Kodak of the world. I mean, you will know, you know, people of our age, you know what Kodak means. But today, there's no need for, you know, cameras. You carry a camera in your pocket on a daily basis. So what we're trying to say is that as banks, we need to be relevant, and we need to be relevant to emerging trends. We've seen also the advent of cryptocurrency coming through. You know, it's a space I don't understand fully. My son understands it a little bit. Asks me about my crypto strategy. But it's the economics of it that I don't understand. But the one thing I've come to accept is that in as much as I didn't really understand how internet stocks made money in the late 90s, I don't understand crypto. But the thing is, crypto is here, it's real, and we need to invest time in understanding it. So we do need to understand this world of fintech that is unfolding in front of us, and I think we do need to be relevant.
Absolutely. Our founder here always speaks about making sure that we don't become the Kodak of our time. So definitely we need to keep evolving. So from what you've just said, I gather that you are not in the camp that says the future of banking is limited, and that we may well be we may well see in the future the death of banks as we know them.
No, I'm not in that camp. I'm of the view that the world still needs to trade, and the world needs to ensure that we trade in a very safe environment, because we're talking about capital here. And we know with the advent of technology, you know, there's more crime that kind of increases. So as a result, you know, we need to actually ensure that banking or trading or financial transacting is safe. So I don't think banks are a thing of the past, but how banks do go about their business and how they interface with the client is where the key is going to be.
Absolutely. And one of the key players in that circle has got to be the regulators. And what are your thoughts on what kind of a regulator we likely or should see? I raise the question because traditionally regulators, bankers, I'm so sorry to put you in that group, have traditionally been seen as conservative people, averse in some aspects to change.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the new age regulator has to be one that is in touch with the developments in technology and one that is agile and agile in the interest of the customer at the end of the day.
Does that mean a young man?
Not necessarily. I think you do find you need more young people coming into the system, but you need a young mindset. Not necessarily a young man, but a young man or a young woman, but a young mindset, a youthful mindset that's able to embrace and understand the new world, because that's the world we're entering into, and that world is moving extremely fast. It's landing fast on us, and you don't also want to find a regulator that's also a dinosaur that also becomes a hindrance to progress. So what I'm trying to say is that an element of youth and old age, youth and experience, I shouldn't call it old age, youth and experience is very important in taking the industry forward.
Yeah. I want us to move on and talk about one of the challenges of our time on the African continent here in South Africa, youth unemployment and growing the economies of the region. The African Union is spearheading this drive to integrate our economies. You are leader of one of those big integrators, big players that will be required. Your thoughts in terms of what we have seen the political leaders do, but what will be required to translate their political promise into actual integration that connects the economies of Africa on the continent?
Yeah, look, as I said earlier on, Africa is a very diverse continent, with its own unique features and challenges as you go along. So if you take South Africa now and other parts of the continent, we do have parts of the continents that have got strong and sound banking systems, whereby we can be able to do the integration that we're talking about. But the challenge with that is getting people to find common purpose. And that common purpose talks to, it is what it is. It's finding common purpose and moving away from individual interests, but just finding common ground to solving the problems for the continent. For example, I've been approached by someone about creating a central clearing structure for the continent. Sure. It's just a conversation that one had on the side in terms of this is probably where we should be going as a continent. But that will require politicians to move away from narrow country interests to talking about what is in the interest of the region. But it will require also different type of leaders. You touched on the issue of youth unemployment, and that's something that's obviously not only unique to South Africa, but I can talk about it in the South African context here, is that we need an economy that is doing very well, a strong economy. It's good for opportunities. But again, the education systems need to also be relevant, especially as we're entering the phase that we're entering in. People talk about the fourth industrial revolution, the information age, and the way we educate our people, it also needs to take into account how we empower them to be able to operate in this new world. Because it's a world where we have moved away from people that are going to be seeking employment, but people that seek to create employment. So young people today think around entrepreneurship, but also how do we actually create the economic climate that does that, but also develop an education system that does that. But it all goes back to leaders. In South Africa, if I'm to be specific, we have great policies. We have, over the years, you go back to the 1990s. You have GEAR, as GISA. We have now the National Development Plan. And what's common is that two things are common. Planning is excellent. Execution is very poor. And central to that is that we need a leadership that will be execution focused. And ruthlessly so, and not being sidetracked by other noises.
Is that an easy conversation to have with the current leadership that we have seen? And I say so because as we speak, we know across the road there is an investment conference that's taking place where the president has put up his hand and said, you asked me to do these things. I have tried.
No, sure, but I think what needs to happen, for example, if I'm to keep the conversation to South Africa, is that South Africa, as it is today, it's a very disjointed country. It is disjointed in many, or fragmented in many areas. You know, if you take the governing party today, the ANC itself has got its own internal issues that are paralyzing it from being able to go out there and execute. So now when a leading party is that fragmented, it talks something to how the leadership in that organization is operating at the moment. So there is a need to really deal and solve with the problems within the party. But then there's also the inter-party dynamics, interpolitical party dynamics that are at play. But I don't believe that people are not united in terms of what needs to happen to SA Inc. But SA Inc. is a function of leadership. Some people have, you know, spoken about a failed state. I think we are either a failed state or very close to being a failed state. So the calls by some people to say that we are at a point where we are a failed state are not made without merit. My view is that we are close to getting there, and it will require a great deal of leadership to extricate us, to pull it back from that cliff.
Absolutely. So some hard, harsh conversations are necessary for us to be able to do that.
Some very brutal leadership needs to, needs to be present, needs to be visible. That leadership isn't there as we speak.
Let's move on, and I want some ideas, because you referenced your son earlier. I have got the same situation. They think they are schooling me, and I think I'm schooling them, but that's okay. But I wanted to ask if you've got some specific suggestions perhaps for the youth of today as they venture into coming in and owning this economy that we know we have in parts destroyed, but are trying to make amends for.
The one thing that is important, Godfrey, for us to accept is that for change to happen, you need the youth. They are the engines of change. You know, if we look at where South Africa is and other parts of the world, it's the youth that have driven them, because you know, we are, as the elders, kind of steeped in our thinking. You know, we are rooted in our thinking, and we are unlikely to change. So the youth need us as well to, for those of us who have been through the path, to say, I think you'll be making mistakes here. So we can school each other in terms of the way forward. My sense is that I think we need young people that need to understand the need for them to be solid people, solid in terms of thinking, solid in terms of understanding the world. And once you have youth that are very solid in their mind, in their brains, and have the capacity to think, then if those youth become the activists of tomorrow, that activism is predicated on a very sound imagination and understanding of the world. And this is where partly I'm worried that we are failing our youth here in South Africa in terms of the education system.
I'm going to tell my children to watch this interview, because I am at war at them at the moment with Candy Crush. And I say, do something that challenges you, and that conversation is going to continue perhaps until I go to my grave. I wanted to trace the path that you traveled to the experience that you have. Was it always financial services for you? Was it you trying to live your father's dreams through that education that you embarked on years later?
My father's dream was for me to be a medical doctor. At one stage, in my youth, I thought this is the path I was going to take. But it took what I thought then was an unfortunate circumstance for me, where I had to take a forced gap year. But in hindsight, that forced gap year was a blessing, because I started to look into myself to say, what is it that interests me? And I thought studying physiology and chemistry wasn't the route for me. So the first call that I made was that I'm going to do something that I enjoy. And let's see where it takes me to. I think at the back of it, because I spent that year, 1983, as a teacher. Teaching was always at the back of my mind. I enjoyed it. It gave me a great sense of pleasure seeing somebody who didn't understand a subject
Yeah.
suddenly being less scared of mathematics and
Sure.
kind of seeing mathematics as their friend.
I was going to say maths is hard. I mean, how did you end up there?
It's hard, but it's fun, and it isn't as hard as I think we were taught it. I think the biggest problem with maths, I think, is in the teaching.
Yeah.
So it is something that I enjoyed, and
Yeah.
I took that path. But that path ultimately led me to say, what can I do with this? And I think I was in the UK at that time when I started reading about actuarial science. And so I explored it. When I came back to South Africa after finishing my studies in the UK, that's when I came across a few companies, but I was convinced to join a small business at that time called Alexander Forbes.
Right.
It wasn't as big as it is today, operating 3 floors in Soweto Street in Johannesburg. I was convinced by a gentleman called Max Mycela, bless his soul, is since passed on.
Sure.
And that's how I entered financial services. And once I was in, because we didn't have proper guidance around about career guidance, so I kind of stumbled onto things. So once I was inside the actuarial world, that's when I learned about asset management.
Right.
And that's when I, through again Max Mycela, I met Mzi Kumalo, and my journey led me to Capital Alliance, which gave me a break to get into investments, and I never looked back.
As they say, the rest is history. Absolutely. I'm going to compress that part of your story into lessons learned during that period. Yeah.
I think lessons learned during that period, there are probably several lessons, probably 3 lessons. One is about yourself. And I think the key thing to all of us is learning about who we are and accepting who we are. And out of that, then comes success, because you know what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. And accepting that this is the person or individual that I am. So it's been a great personal journey for me, a journey of self-discovery. And along the way, I've had people kind of holding the mirror and showing me that, Sello, this is what you're good at. And we have blind spots. And in that process, just removing the blind spots. Some of the blind spots are positive, where you don't realize certain things that are good about yourself, and also seeing the dark side of you. So there's a personal journey that one goes through the 30 years. But also through the 30 years, it's just the ability to explore what you are able to do, and making a difference to society. So in that period, I think the biggest thing was for me, in everything that I have done, Godfrey, I've always been probably in the pioneering end of things.
Sure.
One of the, when I came into Alexander Forbes, it was the first time a person or an African person had been in the actuarial division, and you had to go out there and you meet people and you say, this is the kind of work that I do, this is what I'm studying, and people begin to research and they get inspired to say, if this guy can do it,
I want to do it.
It can be done. So an African person can do this. So that's the first thing that is, for me, was very important to say, in this process, whilst I've been successful, I've been, at the front end. I went into investment management. I was one of the first people, obviously there were people of color before me, but from an African perspective, I was one of the first few with Ethan Dube and others in that space. Inspiring other people, when they read about you. For me, that was the important thing. So that the success that I've enjoyed, not only I meet young people who kind of say, my mother told me about you, and this is what I wanted to do. And I've seen young people do it even better than me. And for me, that's encouraging, because this country has got a lot of brain power, a lot of talent that is inspired. But the last thing for me is we need to leave a sustainable legacy as people that are in our 50s, heading to our 60s. And that legacy is ensuring that we have a cohort, and a pipeline of young people, black and white,
Sure.
And other races in this country,
Yeah.
and also throughout Africa. But we need to leave a legacy as business people that actually ensures that they are able to go out there and make a difference.
Absolutely.
But we have to do the right things now to ensure that there is a world that is sustainable,
Yeah.
that we live a world that actually ensures that these young people,
Yeah.
all of them,
Yeah.
get an equal chance at success.
And you have told your story, legacy, if I can put that as a stroke, through the Sello Foundation. We haven't had a chance to talk about Sello Group because time is running out.
Sure.
But I wanted very quickly to go through what you do there and the kind of stuff that you are going to leave, because this is now set in stone.
Sure. We decided when we formed Sello Group to leave a portion of the equity to a trust.
This is a black-owned company.
This is a black-owned, 100% black-owned company, Sello Group, which has got a number of investments in various areas. And in there, we have about just under 5% of the company owned by this trust, the Sello Foundation.
Sure.
And so the Sello Foundation obviously joins hands with other entities in trying to solve problems that are focused at ensuring that we have the ones that are marginalized, which is typically women and children, particularly in South Africa, to ensure that they are able to succeed. So we do a bit of work, and also in addition to that, I also engage in other entities, other structures where I go and try and take capital from other entities that where I have relationships to try and solve the social problems that we have in South Africa.
Okay.
And I think as corporates, we have a responsibility, one, to ensure we live a sustainable South Africa, and we live a sustainable Africa where all its citizens can be able to thrive.
100%. And you still go back to Soweto, I must not forget to mention.
I do. My siblings are still there, my relatives are still there, so I have grandnephews and grandnieces, so I'm still very rooted in Soweto. I live in Cape Town, but I'm still rooted in Soweto.
Sello Moloko, incoming chairperson, Absa Group, congratulations again, and thank you for giving us time, and all the best on your journey.
Thank you very much, Godfrey.
And from you, I'm taking 3 lessons. You said you need to find who you are. He says you also need to establish what capacity you have to be able to do the things that you see you can do. And finally, remember, sustainability is the touchword of our times. Thank you for watching Captains of Industry. Until next time, goodbye.